welcome, you beautiful, beautiful, beautiful people to ATACS. Adults Talk About Cool Stuff, episode 40. So we're clearly middle-aged at this point, and we've got a nice group of folks that are going to talk to you about video games and other assorted cool oddities. From Wendell, North Carolina, we have Nate. What's the deal, Nate?
That's incorrect. I'm not from Wendell anymore. I'm just going to go ahead and start correcting you.
Okay, well, correct me. Go ahead and start correcting me on my first try.
Okay. It's Clayton now.
Okay, well, you're also not Nate anymore. You're Dr. Jonathan Reed, so we're making mistakes everywhere.
I'm Dr. Jonathan Reed.
Next from Raleigh, we have Flex. How's that? How's it hanging over there?
It's good. I'm not going to quite say I'm middle-aged yet, but I'm getting there.
Yeah, we're creaky. A little creaky. From New York, Mr. Ryan, how are things up there?
I'm having a midlife crisis, so come back, check back with me.
Quarter life crisis, third life crisis. Who's
our host?
Oh God, yeah, he's just a mystery man, isn't he?
Nobody knows.
Maybe we'll leave it a mystery.
We're flipping the script.
He's from Greenville. And he's doing all right. He's a little bit baffled because he's never done this hosting situation before, but he's doing his best. And that's all anybody can ask of him.
That's all you can do.
Doing a great job.
I'm told that we have a busy boy on the podcast today. So, Nate, why don't you get us started and tell us about what's going on with you in the fun world of video games?
Well, I guess I've got a few things that I can talk about, but I have one thing that I mostly want to talk about, so I'll get a couple of shorter things out of the way first.
Get them out of the way.
Yeah, because we don't really need to talk about Mega Man 1 and 2 that much, but I played those.
Okay.
At first I thought you said you really needed to talk about this, and I was like, ooh, this is exciting. This is juicy.
No.
History of gaming. Cracking open the vault.
Yeah. I don't really have that much to say about those. I generally enjoyed playing both of them, but they're Mega Man games, and it was fine, I guess.
How was the jump from 1 to 2? Because I've only played 2, 3, and 9.
Yeah.
I've never played 1, and I've heard 1 is kind of rough.
So I played both of them in the Mega Man Legacy Collection, which is available through Xbox Game Pass, which is how I played those. So I kind of went through like 3 layers of things to play these really old games.
What made you want to play those?
Well, I had just never played any of the Mega Man games really, other than Mega Man X was the only one that I've actually spent any time with.
So just fill in the gaps of your video game history.
I got Game Pass because I wanted to try a couple of things on there. That Legacy Collection was on there, and I was just like, I guess I should just pop into this thing and see what the Mega Man is.
All right.
And so they are kind of one of those, like, I don't know, historically big franchises.
Yeah, so I jumped into 1. I basically save stated my way through it because the Legacy Collection lets you do that, and that game.
Because that's what you do in modern times.
Yeah, and that game's kind of dumb in terms of its level design and how punishing it can be.
Yeah.
And then jumped right into 2 and basically did the same thing, although having to save state about 1/10 as often in that one because that game's just way easier.
Okay.
That's the main difference. If you want to think about the difference between 1 and 2, it's just that 2 is way easier.
Okay. I remember the Quick Man stage being the one that gave me the most trouble. You're like having to fall and these like horizontal bars come across.
Yeah, so I had a save state right before those falling parts and just tried it over and over until I got it.
Yeah.
Did you play it, Flex, did you play it in a format that allowed you to save state?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Those games are, the second one I don't think would be too bad to play without save states, but it still would have gotten frustrating for sure.
Yeah, I think in retrospect too, I could do without save states, but it would definitely it would just be a lot more repetitive. Like you would have to play the entire stage multiple times over and over.
Instead of beating the whole game in like an hour and a half total, probably it would take significantly longer.
Yeah, it would just be a bigger time investment for sure.
Gotcha.
Although the weird thing about those games that I didn't know, somehow I've gone through my whole gaming life without knowing, is that the the 8 robot bosses stages that those games are kind of known for is like half the game.
Yeah.
And the Dr. Wily stages that follow that are significantly longer and more complex and harder than I expected.
Yeah. And Mega Man 3, one of the biggest changes it does is it throws in an additional boss rush at the end during those Dr. Wily stages. So you get to replay,
Is that in 2?
refight all the bosses again. And I think you even fight some bosses from previous games in the series. I could be wrong on that. But
yeah, 2 had a boss rush thing too.
Oh,
well.
okay.
But yeah,
fights. If you watch
for some reason, Mega Man's 3s felt even bigger. So it might have been that it had you fight bosses from previous games as well. I can't remember the details, but
1 had like a couple of the bosses sprinkled back in there, but not all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Yellow Devil boss fight, which is sort of infamous.
Yeah.
And then 2 had like a full boss rush style thing at the end.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's Mega Man 1 and 2. They're fine.
Yeah. And you did play Shovel Knight, which had some of that stuff too.
Yeah, for sure. And then the other game I tried in Game Pass so far was State of Decay 2. I don't know if any of you have been interested in that series at all.
I played the first one, and then I played the second one like 2 sessions, maybe like an hour and a half each session, and then I just sort of lost interest in it.
Yeah, that's not too far off from me. I didn't play the first one, but I probably played about 10 hours ish of the second one, and boy, did that in the game just not grab me in any way.
Yeah, what would you say? What would you say turned you off, if you could pinpoint anything?
It just felt like a bad mix of being completely directionless and devoid of any like personality. And then also, like, the survival aspects were neither challenging or fun.
Right.
So, like...
You talking about the plague hearts?
Yeah, I mean, there are zombies everywhere, and you've got all these, like, meters ticking down and all these things you're supposed to be, like, struggling to keep up with, but, like, the zombies in that game are so not a threat at all.
Right.
I was just walking around with my like low stat character and a baseball bat, just like killing everything and no challenge whatsoever.
Yeah, I had a lot of issues with the co-op. I don't know if you actually got into that, but
I didn't try it.
It's got this sort of weird stuff where, one of the characters, we had this thing where, your character gets tired because that's one of your meters, that endlessly ticks down. And so my co-op partner, his character would get so exhausted that like he literally couldn't even like run or swing his bat more than 2 times. Like he needed to sleep. And then for some reason, it wouldn't let him actually sleep in my bed or whatever, or switch his character.
Yeah, because all I ever did is just switch characters like every 30 minutes or something, and I never had a problem with that stamina.
Right. And but I guess the weird thing is that you, for some reason, like if you're a co-op guest in someone else's game, you can't sleep. So you have to leave the game and go get another character and then bring it back in.
Cool.
Which is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think some people get into that style of game because it's just sort of like running around the map collecting things and being very checklisty or whatever. I don't know.
It's mostly managing stuff, right? Like I haven't played either game, but from watching it, is it correct to say that it's a lot of management stuff, like managing your survivors and your community? I don't know if I have the terminology right here.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like they're trying to do. Yeah, but like your base has so many slots of like facilities you can build. And so I had filled up my base very quickly, like probably within an hour and a half, all my slots were full of facilities. So like I could upgrade them and like research stuff and like create some equipment and stuff. But like all of that seemed so pointless because I could literally just take any of my random characters I had with a baseball bat and go do anything I wanted and like had no resistance whatsoever.
This sounds kind of like the back half of my Frostpunk playthrough.
Yeah.
It's definitely it's a survival thing. I guess in some ways it's trying to aid that sort of Walking Dead idea. So at first you're just trying to, I think what the game wants it to be is you're just trying to get your bearings at first.
Yeah.
And then you're sort of going out, scavenging, upgrading things back at your base until your base is pretty self-sufficient. And then I think you're supposed to kind of like take the fight back to the zombos, and try and, figure out, well, where are they coming from and what's antagonizing them. But, I think Nate's saying that, it never really felt difficult even from the get-go.
Right.
And then I think for me, at least, it was like you'd go and it was like your inventory, even if you had like the biggest bag that you had that you could, like your inventory seemed like pathetically small.
Yeah, you couldn't carry anything.
You had to run back to your base, and then of course you could take a car, but then you had to start thinking about fuel. And it just seemed like an endless thing, that just, there was always some irritating survival aspect that yanked the fun out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I can get behind like a management sim or survival aspects of a game, but like it seemed like there's so much work in this game in the back end of like all these character stats, and all the characters are procedurally generated with all these different traits that affect different things in weird ways, and it feels like it's supposed to be very systemic in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But it just like none of that stuff mattered at all.
Right. And I was actually telling Flex that after I finished State of Decay 2, I was like, did I even like State of Decay 1? I thought I did, but now I'm not so sure.
Ouch.
Yeah.
This one has been interesting for me, and it's kind of I'm kind of glad to hear you guys talk about it, because it's a 2018 game that I hadn't heard about the series or heard anything about it, and I think it was actually the Giant Bombcast I was listening to, and one of them was actually pretty high on it. And I've heard a couple people where it's kind of grabbed them, and they like this, they feel like it kind of develops stories, but then more often than not, it seems like I hear people complain about like it's buggy and the systems are pretty bland. So I don't know. It kind of blipped on my radar, and I had it kind of like, oh, do I want to play this? Let's hear what more people have to say. And then I think, that plus the fact that there are so many other interesting games, like it's kind of moved this one to the cutting floor.
Yeah, it's definitely a little buggy. There is a button in the main menu that is a help I'm stuck button.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That says a lot.
Yeah.
Bethesda should put that in their games, too.
They really should.
There's probably like fast travel or something. Is there their subtle workaround for that?
There's definitely not fast travel in State of Decay 2.
No,
everything is not. It's slow travel, slow fighting, slow grabbing.
But yeah, to me it ended up just feeling like both in terms of like how it looks and like how the game runs, and how little it explains its systems, and how like sort of weirdly antagonistic it is towards you. I ended up feeling like it was like a weird spin-off from like the first Dead Rising game that has none of the soul of those games.
I feel like the first one, when I think back to it, I think it had an actual kind of storyline, for one, that you sort of followed. And of course you did the base management stuff kind of in the meantime. I also think I remember there being a way that I remember always sending out different people from my base. And I don't know that I ever figured out how to do that in this game, if you can do it.
I don't know if you can. I never found a way to do that.
Okay, so you played 10 hours, but I do remember, I think in the first State of Decay, you could send your survivors out. So for instance, let's say you needed supplies and you didn't want to spend your time like going and investigating the shack. You could send one of your guys. If you knew that you had kind of cleared most of the zombies out around it, maybe you could send them to go get stuff for you.
Yeah, and that would play well in the management sim style of this game, where like, well, maybe I'll send these characters together because they like each other, or like they have complementary skills or things like that. Like I would have liked that system.
Yeah, and
Um,
also I
was
think that
nowhere
the
to be
base
found.
build stuff was not quite as complex in the first one as it was in this one. It seems like there's a
Yeah,
lot of, I would find these little like upgrades, like a pill press, some sort of thing I could install to
yeah,
manufacture pills in my infirmary, and I was like, is that good? What does that help with?
yeah. And
You
they give
know?
you no direction on how, like, what you should be focusing on early on and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Anyway,
Anyway, so is there anything else you want to mention on that one? Are you?
not really.
Okay.
I end up
Sounds
not
good.
not really enjoying my time with it, but if anybody else had any other questions, we can. Otherwise, we'll move on.
Well, maybe you could introduce us to a doctor that you know.
Yeah. Oh boy. So I played, and we should do a quick poll. How is this game pronounced?
Vampyr.
Yeah, I think that's what I think too.
That's kind of
Vampyr.
where I go to, Vampyr.
Yeah, it says VAMPYR.
Any votes right?
That's what it looks like to me.
Okay, all right. 4 for
Do
4.
they ever say that word in the game,
Yes.
or do they
like
always
a
say
million
vampire
times.
spelled VAMPIRE?
Yeah, it's always spelt that way, but they say it all the time.
Okay. Is a
so-
vampire just a vampire?
I think probably officially it probably is supposed to be pronounced vampire, but since they spelled it weird, I'm gonna say it's vampire.
I don't know. I mean, the official pronunciation for Fear 3 was Fathrir. So I think, yeah.
Yep.
So I think,
Accurate.
yeah.
All
I
right,
feel like we're in the
so-
right. We're in the right wheelhouse.
Yeah, for sure.
So tell us about it.
So Vampyr, you play as Dr. Jonathan Reed. He's a doctor, and he wants to help people.
Is he a vampire?
He's a vampire.
Do vampires want to help people?
Well, I guess it depends on how you play him.
Would it spoil the game to know that Dr. Jonathan Reed is a vampire?
No, that's the whole point of the game.
Yeah, that's been in trailers.
So yeah, you start out as a vampire. It doesn't build to that or anything. You literally start the game. He wakes up in a dark alleyway and is like, "What's happened to me?" And I'm a vampire. And then spends his nights running up to random people in the street saying, "Hello, I'm Dr. Jonathan Reed," which I just found.
You sold me on this game already. I mean, I've laid awake at night dreaming of a game where, is this like Victorian England or something?
Yeah,
Can I just
it's
where I could run around in a top hat, saying like I'm a doctor,
right,
and be a vampire at the same time?
Yeah, so
that sounds wonderful.
You're always out at night. It's 1918 London. There's the Spanish flu epidemic is like destroying the city, and then you're a vampire, and so you run up to people and tell them you're a doctor, and then they're like super impressed that you're a doctor. And then you help them with their problems, or you murder them and drink their blood.
Great.
Those are the two options.
How do you help them with their problems? Do you go bite people's necks? Do you kill them? Do you talk to them?
So there's a lot of dialogue trees in this game.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to think,
would you say that's the main thing you're doing is talking and going through trees?
I think that's the core of the game. Yeah, is dialogue trees. Gotcha. There is a combat system. There is a lot of combat, so I don't want to say this is like a fully narrative adventure game. It is a third-person action game as well, but I think the core of the game is the narrative dialogue. And
I assume there is a through-line story. It's not just a sequence of haphazard, like helping random people.
No, I'm being silly with that. It is very much a narrative game with a beginning, middle, and end, and a story to tell. All centered around this epidemic and vampires and what all's going on in London.
Mm-hmm.
Have you finished it now?
I did finish it last night, so obviously I'm not going to spoil anything here.
About how long did it take you to finish it all?
Considering for idle time that I just left it sitting, probably about 30 hours.
Okay.
And that was being fairly completionist. I did every side quest. Talked to every person about all their problems.
Gosh. Do you regret doing those, or
No, no. I genuinely enjoyed just spooling through the narrative dialogue trees in this game for some weird reason. It's
Do
something
you think that was one of the better parts of it?
yeah, I think so. It's something that it felt like such a weird callback game in so many ways. Like it just looks like a game, and the combat plays like a game from 10 years ago, and then the just sort of still people standing facing each other, navigating through dialogue trees feels very early Mass Effect, BioWare stuff.
Right.
So I don't know. I guess I found some weird comfort food in this game from games that I used to play a lot.
Yeah. Do you think? I mean, it sounds like you enjoyed it. Do you think? Trying to figure out how to ask this question without sounding dismissive.
Ask, is it a good game?
Do you think the writing and the dialogue trees were well written and well acted and all that stuff, or do you think there was a lot of appeal in because you're talking about him running around the streets being I'm Dr. Jonathan Reed, that kind of stuff. Is there appeal in the actual quality of that stuff, or is there more of you said, kind of a comfort food throwback goofiness appeal?
Does
that make sense?
Yeah. I definitely think the writing and all that is generally pretty good.
Okay.
It is not a high budget game, and it shows a lot. I don't think I would say it's a great game. It's not a polished game. Overall, the experience feels compromised in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. But the stuff that matters, the dialogue and some of the decisions you get to make, and I think the world design is really pretty good overall. That stuff is all solid, even if the game overall feels it's a budget game. I mean, it's not a AAA game made in 2018 by an EA or something like that, right?
Yeah, this is made by, I guess we should clarify, this is made by Don't Nod of Life is Strange and Remember Me fame. And I've never gotten the impression that any of their games have been super big budget. So
yeah.
I don't actually know how big their team is. I would guess they're a smaller, scrappier team, but I don't actually know.
Yeah, I think they seem like they kind of operate at that B-level thing that we talk about having disappeared.
Yeah.
For the most part. And this feels like that.
Right.
This is interesting because I've really been on the fence for a long time. I mean, ever since this thing released, because I even when it was first announced, I was like, okay, so Don't Nod, those guys are pretty cool. So I had it on my radar, and then it came out, and it seems like just the reviews are they couldn't be any more on the fence.
Yeah.
Game. And so it's been really hard. I've been really interested to hear you talk about it.
Yeah.
And I guess it's cool to hear that you've enjoyed it, and some of those trees, the dialogue trees, have been interesting to you. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like the game has been effective at getting you to empathize with the residents of, what is it, 1918 or 18?
Yeah,
London. Or
1918.
1918. I was going to get the digits somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there are a few things. There are a few bones I can pick with this game if you want me to go down that road. But in general, I like the characters. I don't know that I necessarily empathize with a lot of them. There are definitely some that are sort of characters that the game tries to align you with that works really well. Some of the relationships that form throughout the game. Actually, one of the things I was surprised by was that the overall narrative from beginning to end had a lot snappier pace and went a lot further than I was expecting. Mm-hmm. So it goes real deep into some vampire mumbo jumbo and occult stuff in a way that I wasn't fully expecting. I was kind of expecting something a little bit more grounded. But if you were interested in vampire lore and vampire history and how a vampire society, or even just generally speaking, a society of immortals would exist alongside mortals, and what do they think about, and what are they after, and all that stuff. Like, it goes real deep down those holes.
Do you feel like it lost you with that stuff, or were you?
No,
kind of
I really like that, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then
So you
generally,
felt like maybe you emotionally connected with the game.
yeah, I think so. It's certainly at parts. There are definitely parts that don't look for that sort of a connection. Like, so you said you were interested in Follow the Game. One of the things you probably saw in their marketing for the game was like, every citizen has a name and a story, and there are no nameless NPCs, right? That was kind of their big pitch for this game. But then it literally starts the game with you waking up in an alley and not understanding what happened to you or why you are different now. And then all these nameless, faceless NPCs come out and like, hey, we're going to kill you. And then you have to kill them all.
Great.
Awesome.
That was like the first thing that happens in the game. And I was like, I don't know what has happened here.
Perfect.
Right.
Were a lot of people you would fight in combat, were they kind of nameless thugs, or would they often have stories as well?
No. So that's the probably the biggest bone I have to pick with the game, is that all the combat is literally against just faceless people.
Yeah.
Mostly
yeah,
just...
because when you make that pitch of like everyone has a name and a story, then I'm thinking like, oh, could this be a game you could not fight at all if you unless you choose to, because everyone is a specific person.
And I tried in that first encounter where they popped out, and I was like, I don't want to fight, and I tried to run past them, but they wouldn't let me.
Yeah. Did it almost feel like they had combat just because they felt like it was a video game and thus needed combat?
Yeah, I mean, somewhat, for sure.
Well, I had one last question. I guess,
Sure.
Would you say that it's a better game or a worse game, or about on the same level as maybe the first Life is Strange?
Oh, boy. Those are very different things.
Mm-hmm.
Life is Strange is just a narrative adventure game, and this is really an action RPG with a lot of dialogue trees.
Do you have like a lot of skill trees and leveling and that stuff too?
Yeah. And so one of the things is that you gain some experience just from fighting and doing side quests, but not a lot. And the
Right.
big experience boosts you can get are if you decide to feed on a named citizen, who are the people you have dialogue trees with. So that's supposed to be like
what
a
I
big...
understand, if you know more about them, you get more experience.
Yeah, so if you get to know them and learn stuff about them, you get more experience for killing them. But you can go through the whole game without doing that at all. You'll just be lower level.
Okay. Well, is there anything else you wanted to mention on the Vampyr front?
I think that covers most of the main points. One interesting thing that it does with the citizens, which is what they just refer to as the people you can feed on and have dialogue trees with and do side quests for and all that, is that there's like almost like a nemesis system screen for them, a la Shadow of Mordor. And every time you want to level up, you have to go to sleep. And so when you sleep, it progresses to the next night, and then whatever actions you've done, whatever quests you've done, whatever people you've talked to, or if you've like brewed, various cures for whatever the illness they have, or if you've killed anybody, then it kind of like does different events in the world and kind of reorganizes where the NPCs are and some things like that in a kind of interesting way.
Cool.
Yeah, that sounds potentially really neat.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, so those have been most of the jams you've been rocking.
Yeah, that one took up a lot of my time for the last week or so.
All right. Well, I guess we'll pass it on over to the other Fowler. How you doing, Flex?
I'm doing pretty good.
Jamming, fella.
I've been hitting a couple things. I'll make these really quick. Nate and I did play a couple multiplayer games.
Oh yeah.
Finally got around to playing the classic Windjammers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The disc throwing
SNES title?
Gosh, what was it? It was originally on something weird.
Yeah, I'm not
I'll
even
double
sure.
check this. Say again?
I'm not even sure, honestly.
Yeah, but they re-released it on PlayStation 4 recently. I forget what it was originally on, but
Neo Geo, it looks like.
That's right.
yeah, that sounds right. It wasn't on like a Sega or Nintendo or PlayStation, so it was something more oddball. But I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was fun.
It's very simple, but it controlled very well and was just a very fast-paced, snappy, and I thought there was some good strategy and stuff in there too.
What did you play it on?
PS4.
Okay.
Did you enjoy it, Nate?
Yeah, it was fun. It's very quick, reflex-based, like one-on-one disc throwing bonanza. What was the other one we tried that was like a different take on this?
Yeah, so the other one, which I think Will has played this, because there was like
Jam.
Yeah, Disc Jam. Because when Windjammers came back, there were like a bunch of clones that popped up oddly around that time. And Disc Jam was one of them. And
Jam was pretty fun. I wonder if it has anything to do with like the popularity of Rocket League.
Yeah, I think when it came out, they wanted it to be the next Rocket League. I mean, they came out free on PS Plus, which was kind of the thing that got Rocket League its initial boost. You know?
yeah.
So what'd you think of it, Flex?
I mean, coming after Windjammers, it like I don't know how you feel about this, Nate, but it just did not feel nearly as tight as Windjammers.
Yeah, I didn't like the perspective nearly as much as just like the simple way that Windjammers is a top-down 2D game.
Yeah, like the perspective made it a lot harder to judge distances, and the controls just felt a lot more sluggish to me.
Gotcha.
And some of the mechanics just didn't seem like Windjammers has a very streamlined core set of mechanics, and Disc Jam felt a little, I don't know, it didn't feel as smooth as Windjammers did and as tight on the controls, and that's a big part of those games, I would think.
Yeah, I don't know. I had a good time with Disc Jam, and I had kind of wished that it would have gotten as popular as Rocket League, but it could be that if I went and played Windjammers, I'd be like, oh, okay, so this is like the next level of this style of gameplay. But I enjoyed it well enough, but without having any perspective from seeing that the Windjammers.
Yeah. I tried playing online after Nate and I tried it, and nobody is playing Windjammers online. So
yeah, well, no one's playing Disc Jam online either, really. So
great,
yeah.
Perfect. So yeah, those are pretty fun. And then we also played some Mario Tennis Aces.
Oh snap, diggity!
And I may end up playing some more of it. We just played a couple hours of it. They have thrown a lot of mechanics into Mario Tennis now.
Yeah, I heard it wasn't really much like the 64 one.
Yeah.
It shares a little bit of that.
It's been a long time since I played the 64 one, but
it's got a lot more mechanics layered on top for sure.
Yeah. I feel like I didn't fully wrap my head around it in the time I spent with it. I feel like I would need to actually sit down and practice some of the mechanics to fully figure it out.
Yeah, and I think the big thing that I think I've heard is missing is what Waluigi.
No, he's in there.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's the Smash thing, isn't it?
That's the Smash thing.
Oh, okay.
That was Smash.
Okay, so he is in the tennis then.
He is.
I think you're just opening a sore wound here right on the podcast.
Yeah, Waluigi should not be in anything is really where this should be.
Gotcha.
No, Waluigi was created for Mario Tennis. Like, that is his franchise.
All right. Well, good. I guess.
Because Wario needed a doubles partner.
Yeah. Okay. And now he's got one.
Now he's got one. I mean, it seemed good. I mean, it is Mario Tennis with more mechanics is kind of what I came away from it. Mm-hmm. How did you feel about it, Nate?
Yeah, I like the mechanics pretty well from what I played. The thing that it does sound like it's actually missing from the reviews I've read over the past few days is that the single player seems pretty thin, and then there's I think we kind of saw this while we were playing. There aren't like good options for just setting up whatever rule sets you want in a multiplayer setting. Like, you can't just play a 3-set normal tennis match.
Yeah, it looked like there were only 2 scoring options. Just play a tiebreaker, which is the default, or play first to 2 games, which is not really any longer than a tiebreaker.
Yeah.
So it's pretty light on the modes and options and all that stuff. Like, that game seems pretty much to just get you in there, play quick tennis matches, and it's got its one thing it does.
I've seen a lot of complaints about that, so I don't know if that's something realistically they might change at some point, but
I don't know.
The case for now, at least.
Yeah, for sure. So those were some quick multiplayer games. I played 2 single player games. First, I'll talk about I played through the entirety of Yoku's Island Express.
Yeah.
Which
all right.
is like a pinball platformer, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're navigating through this world, and the only buttons you have really are the triggers on the controller, like flip all these pinball style paddles everywhere, and your character like is rolling a ball around. So you navigate through the world by pinballing yourself around.
Okay.
Which I guess that's a totally fine idea and concept. I think what the game mostly ended up being was made me realize that I just don't like pinball.
Yeah.
Which maybe to some extent I kind of always knew. Like, I've never really played a ton of pinball, and every time I've done it, it's been like, I guess this is an okay thing. I don't know. I'm not like feeling an urge to play more pinball. But then couched in like a, 8-ish hour adventure game, it's like, all right, I think this is more pinball than I needed in my life.
I'm kind of curious, like, where, what caught your eye, or where did you?
It's gotten really good reception. Yeah. And I like everything about the game except for the pinball part. Because it's a very colorful game. Like, the soundtrack's really good. Like, the world design's really good. Like, a lot of the adventure-y parts about it and platforming parts about it, like, there is solid design and all that, and like a lot of the reception to it had been very strong. And I think the crux of it is I didn't know, because I hadn't played enough pinball to really know that I didn't like pinball that much. Mm-hmm. So I was like, oh, this seems like a very well-made, like, platformer / adventure game or whatever. And I think it totally is. I really think it just comes down to, like, do you like pinball or not? If you like pinball, I think this is probably going to be a very good game that you would like a lot.
Right.
I just realized that I do not have a fondness for pinball.
Yeah,
is really what it comes down to.
That's why I'm on the fence on this one, because I just have no idea whether I like pinball or not. I've just basically never really sat down and played pinball.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I was at. Because if you do like have any appreciation for pinball, it is a very well made game. Like, it's a good game. It's just, if you don't like pinball, cool.
That's kind of cool. Yeah, I hadn't heard about it, so I was wondering, like, if it was just one of those games that had been looking pretty solid, or if you had an itch to scratch, or where it kind of came out of.
Yeah, no, it's totally like a game that came out and just had very good reception.
Well, Windows used to have a game called 3D Pinball Space Cadet. So maybe, Nate, you could cut your teeth on that one and just kind of see where you land.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really do think the crux of that is how much you like pinball, because they, like, every now and then you'll get in these, like, pinball arenas or whatever that, like, almost look like, the camera will, like, snap to them, and so you can see the whole thing, and it's almost like a pinball table style setup. And like, by the time I'd done a couple of those, every time I'd get into one, I'd be like, oh, another one of these. All right. I'm going to try for a dozen times to get this ball in this thing, and then it'll finally go, and then I'll goof something up, and it'll circle back around, and I'll have to try it again. It's going to be a thing.
That's always so, I don't know, it's always such a disappointing thing. That's how I feel playing all the Uncharted games. You know, it's like a combat section will come, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
another one of these. I got to shoot. This.
I mean, especially the pinball sections in Uncharted.
Is there a real
those are the worst. You know?
I'm just picturing this in my head.
Although I bet
Is that-
if Nolan North voice acted my pinball machine, it would be more engaging.
Yeah. I would like to see, Uncharted pinball voiced by Nolan North.
It's probably like him like having to climb up a plane that's exploding and falling apart.
Mhm.
Would be pinball segments in Uncharted.
Mm.
Yeah, but it is a really well made game. You just have to like pinball, and I do really dig the soundtrack.
Nice.
The only other thing I have to talk about, which is also the thing I played the most in the past 2 weeks, is Subnautica.
Right.
Okay.
And I've put a pretty good chunk of time into that, and it is a survival game, which is not a genre I've played very much, but it's gotten very good reception, and it's also like a narrative-driven survival game. So it's not a thing where like, and I say that loosely because there's not a ton of story in it, but it is narrative-driven in the sense that there is a story and there is an end to the game. So like there is a driving objective. It's not a thing of like just survive as long as you can.
Right.
And that game's pretty neat. It definitely has a lot of the survival stuff of like, all right, I need to go out and collect some fish to make some food and some water and like these kind of upkeep management things that are not always exciting.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely has that part to it that sometimes is like, I don't know if I really am like on board with this level of this kind of management. But the bigger world they have and the bigger like progression of what you end up experiencing the world and collecting and building and the creatures you see is pretty cool and pretty well done. It's, if you don't know, it's in a very watery world. So you've crash landed on this alien water planet. And at the very beginning of the game, you have very little. And you just go out, you start collecting things. You start off just grabbing some fish and some like titanium or copper ores or the stuff that's kind of close to your ship or your escape pod, which landed in like very shallow water. And from there, you just start branching out and going into like deeper water and more dangerous territories and slowly start running into like bigger and scarier creatures. And it's actually been one of the things that's stuck with me the most of this game is, I don't know how you guys are with like dark water levels in games, but like it can get really creepy at times when you like dive down deep somewhere and you can't see anymore because light doesn't reach. And then being an alien planet, like there's just all sorts of weird creatures that you'll run into, and some of them are hostile, some of them are not, but it can definitely get very creepy.
Well, there's some creatures down in the bottom of our ocean that look like they came from alien.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Like this is another game that wasn't on my radar, but actually I watched a few minutes of probably about 15 minutes or so of the quick play you posted, and it just looks, and I ended up picking it up on the Steam sale. It just looks really cool. It's like, I kind of like sandbox survivals, but I really want them to have maybe like endpoints.
Yeah.
And it seemed like between all that and like kind of the unique setting and like just it seemed like that game had a pretty nice level of polish. Like just at a glance, I ended up picking it up, and I'm looking forward to trying that. Is there like combat in the game? Is it sort of or not really?
Yeah, not really. Like you do, I can't remember if you start with it or not, but you pretty quickly get a combat knife. And
I played like an hour, and I just 3D printed a knife, which is pretty cool.
There you go. Yeah, that is another cool thing about the game is you crash land in your escape pod, and all that's in the escape pod is there's a radio, which is basically how you get like the few directives you get, and then there's like a first aid station that just generates first aid kits like every hour or something. And then there's like a storage chest, and then there's your fabricator. And your fabricator is basically this 3D printer that you just like toss random materials in, and then it prints out whatever you're making, which is, I find really amusing, because it's like, yeah, here's like a rock and a leaf or something, and then it just like, the animation for it is just like these lasers move back and forth, and this like knife will materialize.
The best one though is the one type of fish that all you need is the one fish, and it turns it into a water bottle.
Yeah, you stick a bladderfish in there, and it 3D prints a water bottle for you,
full of fresh water.
Yeah,
and there's some other games like that. I think Watch Dogs 2 has a 3D printer where you 3D print your weapons, and there's a new kind of wave survival game coming out called Earthfall that made a point of mentioning that you 3D print your weapons. So apparently that's a new sweet idea.
Yeah.
I guess Prey kind of had it with the fabricator too.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, they make it snappy and stuff. But you get that combat knife, and that's still really the only weapon I've gotten. I just built a robot suit that may be able to fight. I haven't really tried yet. And the knife is pretty poor. Like, it's really used for like cutting like plants. Like, you can cut things to like get materials off of it. So like you can get some vines, like cut off some vines or cut off some coral. Like it's used primarily to like cut off materials that you need. But you can.
That's kind of cool. I'm on board with this game being like more exploration focused. I was just curious if there was like a self-defense or hunting aspect to it. It sounds like maybe that's not super heavy.
Yeah, absolutely not. Like I think the only things I've actually killed in the entire game are I went on an island and there were like these crabs that were really annoying that attack you, and I cut them. And then there's like some. Do it.
Jeez, brutal. Just
that was
get up on there, cutting some crabs.
They attacked first, man. You do what you can. I also have killed these like piranha type fish, because they'll actually like latch onto your arm, and your character will like put his arm in front of your face so you can see, and it's just like this piranha thing like just latched onto your arm. So if you pull out your knife, you can like cut them off. But 97% of the enemy creatures I run into, I turn around and run away because they are large and they are scary, and they would definitely kill me before I could kill them with that little knife.
It's like giant sea squid you run into, and you're just like going at it with the knife.
Yeah. I can't imagine tackling some of these things with a knife. Like that knife does not seem like, even those crabs, like they're really small and they take like 3 or 4 hits with that knife. And some of those big things, like I've accidentally gotten too close to, and they've hit me and they hurt a lot. So this game is definitely more about like avoiding stuff. You really don't want to be fighting unless it's an absolute last resort. Which I think is pretty cool. Like the game does a really good job at making you feel like you are on a dangerous alien planet, and you are not there to conquer. You are not there to like take over this planet and exterminate stuff and all that. Like you're there to, you learn this early on, so this isn't a spoiler. Like your final goal is to escape the planet. And like you're there to get what you need to get off the planet and get out of there. And that's definitely what it feels like, is you're slinking around trying to find what you can. And there's a lot of mystery along the way. Like I'm not going to get into any details, because I think a lot of the joy of this game is like uncovering the mysterious stuff in it. But like, as I've played, probably the thing I've enjoyed the most is just seeing the new creatures, like seeing the alien creatures on there and their technology, and like just the stuff that's happening on that planet. And none of it's big or flashy, but like the way you come across it, I think is really cool. And I also think the stuff you can make ramps up really in a really exciting way too, because you start that game with like nothing, and then like you build like a couple of things I've built, like feel really substantial. It's like, oh, I have this like little sea, I don't know, like scooter type thing, and like that feels really amazing. Now I can just like zip through the water a lot faster, like, and it keeps escalating from there. Like the technology, like the stuff you're able to eventually build, like escalates in a really cool way. So it's got a nice progression to it. That's fun, in both like the aesthetics and like, I don't know, thematic stuff you see, and then also the stuff you actually build to use. So it's cool.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, anything anyone else wants to ask about the Subnautica?
I'm into it. I just started it, so I'm going to be diving deep into that one.
Oh,
Really?
You kidding me?
Oh.
double entendre.
Oh.
Thanks
Anything
for
else?
that.
Anything else you want to?
What is your very? I mean, you've only played like an hour, but anything stand out in that first hour, or still just figuring things out?
Yeah, it's just figuring things out, and it is the immediate like, oh, look at all these things I can build. Like looking at the list of blueprints that you just start with, I had like 10 things where I was like, oh, I need that.
Yeah, the game does a really good job at making you excited about the things you're going to build.
Yeah.
And it does a good job at organizing the blueprints too, I think.
Yeah. The one thing that I hit right before I stopped is that my storage locker got full. And then
I built so many lockers. Holy cow!
Yeah. So there's one storage locker in your ship, in your pod that you can
that
store
fills up
stuff in, and that filled up immediately. And then I was like, oh, I guess this isn't infinite storage. And I was just like scrolling through my blueprints and saw that there's like just a locker that you can just like attach to the ocean floor, so it'll stay in one place. And I was like, I guess I'm just gonna have a whole colony of lockers down here.
That's great. You can build really elaborate like sea bases if you want to.
Yeah.
Mine's pretty haphazard, but yeah, you can build all sorts of stuff. I have so many lockers.
Yeah.
All right. Well, any other games you want to touch on there, Flex?
Nope, that's been it for me.
All right. Well, I'm going to throw it up to New York. Ryan, let us know what the deal is, dude.
What is the deal? Well, have I got a deal for you? No. I did finish, I think I had talked about in maybe our last episode, that I was playing a game called Moonlighter, which I had actually backed on Kickstarter. And I did finish that. And that one ended up kind of lukewarm on it. And I don't know that I would strongly recommend it. It's sort of an action RPG, and I don't know. It's kind of tough for me because, like in terms of being an action RPG, there were some things that I liked. So I wouldn't write it off as like a terrible game. I think the combat was pretty snappy for that type of game, and the progression loop, it's fairly straightforward. You go into dungeons, collect materials, get money, craft, and repeat, and go into tougher dungeons. That had, some of that kind of somewhat satisfying, like itch scratching, ARPG itch scratching fun to it. So, but at the same time, like, there were any number of things I felt like it did either kind of in a mediocre way or maybe even fell flat on. Like, you spend a lot of time in randomized dungeons, but the dungeons, they'll have different enemies and slightly different layouts, but they're pretty predictable, and they don't really have any like secrets or systems that, the more interesting like roguelike procedural generation type games tend to do. So, it very quickly becomes pretty straightforward. And then the other thing, one of the game's kind of selling points I felt like is that it kind of advertises the shop layer that it has, where, thematically you could think of it as a game like a little bit like the Dragon Quest IV or the Racketeer, like in that you're a shopkeeper in like this RPG world, and you're running a shop, and things you find you can sell in the shop. But that ended up, from my perspective, being like pretty small mini game element, and it actually at times just really bored me. There wasn't a lot of interaction, and you would have to do a little bit of price guessing, but once you knew the price of any given item, it was pretty much fixed. So really it advertises itself as an action RPG, and it's kind of okay as an action RPG, but I don't think it's particularly strong. And then, if you were thinking of it as a game like Racketeer, which was kind of, unique and really focused on those shop simulator elements with like dynamic pricing and buying and selling and, a lot of dialogue and haggling, like it just really doesn't have any of that to kind of distinguish itself. So it was okay, but, I'm on the fence, and I would almost say with so many other good games out there that unless you're just looking for like kind of a fun ARPG, like almost Secret of Mana Combat, maybe a little faster type game.
So if you could just like, how would you describe the like real low level combat interaction? Is it like real fast paced, a lot of dodging and like using cooldown abilities, or are you using resource abilities? What does that look like?
Yeah, the combat is actually very simple. So it's, I think there are like 5 different weapon types, and pretty much, and there's a dodge roll, and like each weapon, except for the bow, each weapon kind of has a combo, like just a 3-hit combo. And if you connect with the final hit, it does double damage. So there's kind of an incentive to finish your combos.
Right.
And I thought the enemy
you can be interrupted out of those and all that good stuff, probably.
Yeah, like if the enemy like doesn't attack animation into you or moves past you, or if they're just gonna hit you really hard, you might like have to stop and dodge roll out.
Okay.
But really, that's and you can carry 2 weapons. Like I did the gloves and the bow. So like in some situations, I'd switch to the bow, fire off a couple shots, like maybe dodge roll around, and then when I felt like it was safe to get in, I would move in with my like claws or gloves and do like, get more dangerously close, but hit faster and kind of harder.
Right.
So they had some. I wouldn't say there's anything really advanced about it, though. I mean, I thought the weapons felt pretty good, but it's not a particularly deep combat system. Like there aren't abilities or things like that would, that you might find in a more like a ARPG with deeper combat.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the developer kind of kept their, promises, or do you feel like it kind of followed through with what you expected from the Kickstarter, or are there things that maybe promises they didn't keep or things they didn't do?
No, I mean, I'm not really salty about it. Like I don't regret backing it. They did a good job with the pixel art and the music. I think the combat was snappy, and they really did. They advertised it as an ARPG with roguelite and shopkeeping elements, and that's really what they delivered. They just did it in a very indie fashion, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I don't dislike the game, and I don't want it to come across that way. It's just that I think, if you're looking at this game and thinking like, oh, hey, that looks like Racketeer, like, or something like that, you'll probably be disappointed. And yeah, I don't know. It's tough. Like it's because I want the game to be successful, and I think there's like a core there that they could either have, or maybe if in future patches, like make some of those mechanics a little more interesting. Like if the dungeons maybe were a little more varied and had a few more secrets, and the shop layer had a few more mechanics or some dynamic pricing or haggling or something that you had to deal with. Like, you know, they could really bump that game up. But as it is, it just ends up coming as not bad, but a little bland.
Gotcha. Well, what else you been playing?
I spent some time in the Breach.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I might put a pin in that game. After having cleared normal with 4 squads. The Riftwalkers, I think the Zenith Guard, the Steel Judoka, and the Blitzkrieg.
Okay.
And I had a good time with it.
The
I
resting
mean,
hulks?
I like. What's that?
You skipped the resting hulks?
I just picked
Yeah.
like 4.
No, that's fair.
I just kind of unlocked 4 cheaper ones in the list and went for it. But yeah, I mean, the game is a good time. There are things it does that remind me a lot of FTL, which is a game I do really like. You know, it has the depth, it has optional challenges. You have the varied starting options and kind of semi-randomized upgrade choices. And you know, it has like that kind of, it feels like it's balanced, I guess. I'm not sure how to describe it, but I don't know. It feels like there are a lot of meaningful choices in like its combat and stuff. And I mean, it does some smart things with the turn-based strategy genre. You know, protecting elements and pushing enemies around and redirecting them and really trying to leverage the terrain kind of create some moments where you feel really smart. Like, oh man, I just pushed this Vec like into this acid, and then like, you know, I took this other one and threw him around so he would shoot his buddy, and like maybe took a hit here. Yeah, I'm hoping to have some time to get back to this one, but I don't think, I guess it's a little early to say this, I don't think it's going to grab me quite as much as FTL did.
Right.
I think for a couple reasons. One is maybe I don't have quite as much time. Or there's more other good stuff to play right now, but also there were some times where I think Into the Breach feels a little puzzly. And I get some puzzle fatigue playing it. But anyway, that's kind of my take on that. The most fun that I had of the squads I played was probably the Zenith Guard. I think I really like the science vessels for some reason. Like, I think they get a lot of power, like a lot of utility without having to invest a lot of reactor upgrades.
Is that the one with the laser mech?
Yeah, that's the squad with the laser mech.
Yeah.
I like some of the science ones a lot. The one in the Zenith Guard frustrates me because his like the pool that he has doesn't go through things. So like if there's like a building or another mech or enemy between you and the thing you want to pull, you can't make use of it. And that caught me a lot.
Yeah, the thing
because there's another mech that has that exact same ability, but it lobs over things.
Yeah, it has like the artillery pull.
Yeah, and I'm like, that's just strictly better.
Worked for me with that one was that when I played the Zenith Guard, I got the teleporter, which let you switch places with an enemy.
Oh, the teleporter is like my favorite weapon in the game.
And that science vessel is flying without like a special pilot, so you could just like fly anywhere and like switch places and just like dunk the enemies.
The Flame Behemoth squad has SWAT mech on it, which starts with the teleporter, and that's great.
That's pretty amazing. And then Blitzkrieg, those guys. I mean, I had a rough start with Steel Judoka, but they were able to pull it out. But man, Blitzkrieg, like, they just get like that grapple hook is such garbage. And, like,
yeah,
you basically have to have a flying pilot to make that thing worth anything. And like, plus, like, I think their mech choices are just some of the worst in my opinion. Like, I don't like the brute mechs. Like, I think most of their weapon choices are just kind of garbage. So maybe that's just me and I haven't seen enough of the game, but it just feels really hard to dig them out of like where they start.
Oh, I agree.
So
I'm laughing because everyone's reaction to the Blitzkrieg is just priceless.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. At first,
you play all of the other squads and all of the other ones. It's like, yeah, you might like some better or worse than others, but like you play all of the other ones and you're like, yeah, like they're well equipped to get through this game. Like, you know, they have things that you can work with. And then you start up the Blitzkrieg and you're just like, what? How? Like, what is this?
yeah. Because I had, you know, my first run with the Judoka was pretty rough, and I was like, okay, but then, you know, I was able to get a good clear and kind of keep going, and they kind of come out pretty, you know, a lot stronger. But then, like, yeah, I did the Blitzkrieg and I had a rough run. I was like, well, maybe it's like the Judoka, and then I had another rough run, and then I had to change the way I was thinking.
Yes.
Where like you have to use that armored brute to like just block shots, but then you start falling behind on board position.
Yeah.
And I guess that's when you're supposed to try and set up the lightning attack, but man, it's just so risky. And like you risk killing your own guys, you risk killing like environmental objectives. It just feels like you have to try so much harder with the Blitzkrieg to accomplish like similarly good results.
I think they really want you to use that hook mech, the brute, to be part of the chains, because they give it the armored ability, and the hook seems kind of meant for like, all right, let's stick this mech in the chain and then pull something else into the chain, and then it's armored so it won't take as much damage. The whole squad just seems to be about that chain, and I just find that chain so hard to make use of, especially because it damages, like the chain itself will damage anything you're trying to defend. So like I got to the point with that squad where I would actively avoid any mission that had the word defend in it. Like if you're defending the train, if you're defending a bomb or a rocket, like any defend mission you just do not want to do with that squad. I
started doing the same thing. It's like, okay, but, you know, I had kind of, sort of, like with other squads, I would kind of think, like, ahead, but not always that much. So it's like, all right, what has the best... And, you know, I'm just playing on normal, not hard, but it's like, all right, what has the best rewards? All right, I'll go for that. Yep. You know, unless I just felt like I was grossly underprepared. But with the Blitzkrieg, it's like, oh, man, like... Yeah. So what does this map do? Okay, I better not do that one.
That's actually one thing, the more I played the game, especially when I went up to hard, that, like... what squad you're playing as, like the maps you choose can make a big difference. So like certain squads, you might want certain maps because you can look at the maps before you choose your mission. And the Blitzkrieg is one very simple but one very important rule: no defend missions ever.
It is funny to me because like it's hard for me to not draw parallels between this game and FTL, and some parts of it feel similar to me. But in FTL, the one ship, I think there were like 8 or 9 ships, and the one that I never wanted to play as was the Engie ship. That one just always felt like garbage to me.
And in this game, it's the Blitzkrieg.
Yeah, I guess they have to put in like an underdog.
Yeah, I did beat hard with him, so like it is doable, but it's just always much more of a struggle than all of the other squads.
All right.
Yeah. Good times.
So, I don't know. I guess there's not enough of a story for there to be a spoiler cast, but it does seem like we have a collection of people who really dig into the breach. So is there anything else that you want to touch on, Ryan? Anything else you've been playing?
I just started up maybe a few hours into God of War. And I don't know if maybe the more interesting thing about that is that I recently upgraded my television, and to a 4K TV. The TV I had was it was a good LCD, like a good 1080p LCD, and I'd had it for I think over 10 years. So it was a Samsung, and it was still kicking, but I felt like maybe it was taking a little more warm up time and kind of on a slow fade. So with the market the way it is, and 4K kind of having come down so much, I ended up getting a 4K TV. And while I was starting on that train, I went ahead and upgraded to a PS4 Pro, and picked up God of War. But that game, I haven't played a God of War game before, so I'm kind of a newcomer to the series. I played some other, I guess, third-person melee beat-em-up type games.
Well, they renamed this one God of War. So I mean,
this is the first God of War.
It's like a new reboot of the jam.
I think so far I really am digging what it's doing, though. And it looks pretty amazing.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, do you notice, like, I mean, I think that game's one of the best looking PS4 games anyway. Like, I played it without upgraded stuff, and I still think it looked better than maybe every PS4 game I played. But did you notice a big step up for you having a PS4 Pro and a new TV and all that?
It's hard for me to say because I haven't played this on like my old setup. But it does like look super great. With like, I set it so, and the PS4 gives you a choice of performance versus resolution. So I decided to go with. For this one, I went with resolution.
You need those frames.
Yeah, well, and I mean that's the thing, like, because I kind of want to experiment, and with a game like Monster Hunter, I might actually favor performance if it gave me the choice. Just because I have noticed that, like, when things are moving, I think I'm getting a bit more blur, and I think at that 4K resolution, it might only push out 30 frames per second. Not 100% sure about that, but I don't know if that's just a cinematic effect that it does, or if it's because it actually is like kind of going for that kind of high resolution color. But it's not like a super fast paced game in a lot of parts that I've played so far, and like those cutscenes are pretty cool too. I gotta say, like, I mean, I think they've mellowed this God of War down a little bit too, because just as an outside observer, like, all the other ones looked just like so over the top to the point of me just rolling my eyes and being like, okay, which god of the Greek pantheon is Kratos ripping in half with his bare hands now?
Yep.
But it's pretty cool, like, to see these dudes just like smashing each other. And I don't know, and they have those moments where he's kind of like showing like a hint of emotion, or Kratos is showing a hint of emotion and kind of like trying to deal with I guess traveling with his son. They have a lot of those moments, and then and that game, like, I've watched a little bit about some of the effort they put into like the combat animations, and a lot of the feel of that game is super good. Like, even just like throwing and recalling the Leviathan axe, like, it just has, the first time you do that, like, it's just so sweet. You're like, okay, so what am I doing? I throw this axe. Okay, it's like sticking in this guy's head, and it's like press triangle to recall it, and it just like snaps back into his hand.
Yeah.
Or when you smash.
That's my favorite part of that whole game is throwing and recalling that thing. It's so good.
Yeah, that part feels great. Or like when you're smashing dudes with your shield, or like counterattacking, like just all of those punches and shield bashes, and like a lot of that stuff just feels like really kind of weighty. So they've done a great job of like that beat 'em up feel. So yeah, not too far in on that. Don't want to spoil anything anyway, but so far I'm digging it.
All right.
Nice.
Well, I guess I'll throw out a little bit of knowledge on some of these games I've been rocking recently.
What you been playing, Will?
I started out because I had cleared off a lot of the stuff in my backlog, so I started out trying to kind of play some games that were really highly regarded by a couple folks. So some of the ones that I went through were I attempted Bloodborne. I attempted Darkest Dungeon. I attempted The Witness. And there was one other one that I found on I think it was maybe on a favorite games list of a guy named Flex, who's on this very podcast called Freedom Fighters.
Oh boy.
And I was able to locate it in a way that's maybe not the most legal, but
Okay.
it was located. And
Would this be a PC version?
yeah, it was on PC.
Okay.
And so I picked that up and started kind of running around with it. And so at first I was like, man, this thing looks really 2003 or whatever, you know. But
that is when that game came out.
But actually, I thought it was pretty fantastic. So
yeah. How much of it did you play?
I beat it.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah. So, well,
awesome.
on the normal at least.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was great.
Did the PC version seem solid?
Yeah, it was good.
Other than it being old, of course.
Yeah, and I kind of knew about it, I guess, when it came out a while ago. I had at least heard of it, but you know, the way that they talk about it, they're like, well, you know, you've got the squad, you know, and I guess like when I think about having to manage a squad, I think about like, I don't know, like Rainbow Six, like the really old Rainbow Six is where you're like having to pick every little thing and outfit everybody and draw their routes and stuff. But these guys, you know, the basic system, you know, the more objectives you complete, the more influence you get, and then you've got these levels of influence. As you get the different levels of influence, then you have the ability to recruit more soldiers. And the soldiers are pretty competent themselves. Yeah. Like you don't need to like really babysit them. And there's a little bit of strategy in how you pick them too, because some have shotguns, some have pistols. There's some guys who just seem to have like infinite Molotovs, and so they're just like hurling Molotovs left and right, and they're rifle guys. And so depending on kind of where you are, you know, if you're about to kind of go into a building, you know, you might want to recruit the ones with shotguns. But overall, you know, the shotgun was one of my least favorite things about the game, just because I'm a shotgun man, and the shotgun in Freedom Fighters is terrible. But that's just how it goes sometimes.
If I remember correctly, that was more of a like assault rifle and maybe sniper rifle type of game.
Oh yeah. But it wasn't really a lot to micromanage, and one of the things that's cool is that you really only have 3 different commands. You know, you can have everybody regroup on you, you can attack, and you can do it target by target. So you can on PC you'd hit 2 to tell someone to attack someone else, and then of course you could direct each of your squad members to attack a different person. Then you could hit 3, and that would just cause them to defend wherever you had posted up. So that was actually a really kind of easy and elegant system. I think the squad members had good pathing, and a lot of times they take really effective positions. So, you know, I would be, I guess I'm used to squad members just kind of bumbling around, you know, and I kind of expected them to do that, but a lot of times they take good positions. Like, I remember one of the things that's actually great about the game is the level design is really good. And so, so there are a lot of positions where, you know, you just can't bring your whole crew in there. So you're going to need to kind of like figure out kind of, well, can I get a window, or can I come at this from a different angle? And so a lot of times that would be kind of like you looking at elevation and kind of looking around to see where you could kind of flank to kind of like take out the mounted gun, so that then you could kind of go in. So that was actually a pretty cool thing. I had a good time with that. And another thing that's great is the camp. It's got some real serious, like, Red Alert-esque camp to it.
Yeah, it does.
But I'm sorry, you were going to ask a question, I think, maybe.
Oh, no, I was just going to say I'm glad you enjoyed it. And I'm also, like, it's nice to hear that you picked up on a lot of the things that I really liked about it, which is your squad mate's AI is really good, the level design's really good, and the, like, controlling your squad is not complicated. Like, it's done in kind of an arcadey way that's fun and effective. Yeah.
So, and you actually need them, which is actually a cool thing. Because, you know, you're used to playing stuff like Call of Duty where, you know, you've got this squad, and the whole reason the squad is there is to sort of simulate, like, okay, this is a wartime situation. You're not going it alone. You know, you've got other soldiers. Mm-hmm. But in this one, there are places where, you know, if your squad is down, then you notice how much harder the game is and how
And
much easier it is to get flanked. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I remember parts I feel like just relying on them and like me not doing a whole lot, like mostly just spending my time coordinating them and like not firing much myself.
Oh yeah, especially. I mean, there's some really hard. The other thing that kind of got to me a little bit. So the only real gripes I had about one is the shotgun is really bad.
Mm-hmm.
Two, there's some levels. The one thing that's kind of neat about the game is that you kind of can tackle missions in a different order. And
yeah,
so,
I was going to bring this up.
Yeah, so if you want to take care of like helicopters or something, or you don't want to tell helicopters to be attacking you on the next level, you can go take out the helicopter base. And so
this is something I cannot believe. I've not played any other game that's done this, but it's such a smart idea. Is like they give you 3 or 4, like they'll give you this group of levels, like 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever, and you can do them in any order. But like every level has something that affects the other levels. So it's like if you want to not deal with helicopters, this level has the helicopter pad that if you blow up, you won't have to deal with helicopters anymore. And it's like just this network of effects that is really fascinating.
Yeah, so that was pretty good. I mean, and like you say, it would be cool to see some games kind of expand on that sort of system. Yeah. There was one level where there was a helicopter. It was one of the levels where I was supposed to take out, if I took out the pad, then I would take out the helicopters in that region. And like, it was like the helicopter stuff is kind of, because it's using these old 2003 graphics, like it was really hard for the game to communicate to me when the helicopter was going to attack. But if the helicopter did attack, it was like Blitzkrieg. I mean, it would like, it was like,
those things are ruthless.
Yeah, it wouldn't just shoot you with the mounted gun. It was like if the helicopter decided to attack, and it was really hard to tell if it was, but if it did, it would not only start like peppering the whole ground with machine gun, but it would shoot like rocket after rocket after rocket after rocket.
Yeah. And they want you dead.
Yeah, so there was one level that I died on like probably like 6 or 7 times in a row just because I was like, is the helicopter going to decide that I don't need to be here anymore? If it does, then that's it.
I remember having situations in that game where I'd run into situations like that where a helicopter or something would get me multiple times. Then I'd be like, well, maybe I should go try a different level. And then like you can change level. And I think you even carry over like your influence progress.
Yeah. Yeah. And I did that at one point. There are a lot of times you need to get explosives from one level to take them into another level. And so like if you want to take out a bridge and you've got no C4, then, you can actually go and do the level. But if you don't blow up the bridge, you're kind of sacrificing the opportunity for some more influence. So, but it's cool. There's this momentum that by the end of the game, like I think I have like, I don't know, 7, 8 guys, and they were kind of doing just about everything for me. And of course it wasn't difficult, but at the same time, it's kind of satisfying because, you've worked the whole game to kind of gain all that influence,
Yeah. I remember it feeling really cool to get that big squad at the end. I think it caps out at like, if you do everything, I think you can get up to like 12 people.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. I remember I played through that game twice, once on normal and then again on hard. And I remember like playing through the second time and like doing everything and getting up to the full dozen and like storming that final level with like that ginormous squad. And it's like a really fun and cool ramp up to that size.
Yeah. The only other thing I was going to mention about Freedom Fighters is, and this is just funny. I don't know. It's just weird. It's just kind of funny gameplay design. But there's this little kid, and he actually becomes like, you actually use him at some point in the game. Like he actually kind of starts helping you and being part of your squad. But during half the game, you're not even talking to him. But he's in every single level, and he always knows where the explosives are. And he talks in like this sort of like inner city jive talk. So he's like, hey man, what's up? He's like, you're going to want to blow up those helicopters. I saw some dynamite next door. And it's like, dude, why do you always know where all of the explosives are? But, he's a pretty funny little dude. And, But anyway, he's just ridiculous.
Yeah. What'd you think of the soundtrack?
Oh, my favorite tracks were the one that I posted in the channel, which I think is like Battle for Freedom or something like that. And then there's another one called Infiltration, I think, that's really, really good. So I really liked a couple of them. I was surprised that there were certain parts that it kind of syncs pretty well with the action. So when things get a little heavy, the music will pick up a little bit. There's a lot of choral parts that I wasn't as into that are like, and I'm
my
not
favorite
super.
My favorite thing about the choral stuff, and you already kind of hinted at this, is that the soundtrack's pretty dynamic. Like, it does a good job at like switching around whether you're in or out of combat and that kind of stuff. But like every time you blow up something like big or important, it like just it just like busts out with all that choral stuff and
Yeah, and it also, I think it says like, yeah, or something. I can't remember what it says, but you blow up a helicopter and it's like, yeah! And then you go and put the American flag up, so it's...
as one does.
Yeah. So that was Freedom Fighters.
It's a good game. I'm glad you liked it.
That was fun. The other thing I played that I had no idea really what to expect out of this thing, but a friend had told me that he saw that you could get the For Honor starter pack for free or something. And so I guess it's like there's a certain number of characters that you might want to play with in the multiplayer. But just like a lot of these, I guess multiplayer centric games, there is sort of a campaign. So there are 3 factions. There are these, there's like a samurai, there's like a Vikings. I did mention I'm talking about For Honor, right? Anyway, there's Vikings, and then there's like knights, and they each have like a 6-mission co-op campaign. And it's not really designed from the bottom up for co-op. Like you just feel like a duplicate soldier, but it is pretty. It's actually pretty good. We had a pretty good time with it, and for the price of free, it's like 5 hours of like AAA content and production and cutscenes and a pretty eloquent, combat system. So, you've got your 3 stances, like a la Witcher 1 or something. You've got like a left and an overhead and then a right kind of stance, and you can do heavy swings and light swings. Then there are things like guard breaks, and after you break someone's guard, you can kind of push them in one direction. So one of the things that's really, really fun to do in the game is like there's all kinds of environmental hazards peppered everywhere, and sometimes you fight on bridges. So some guy will be sitting there like whacking at you, and you can like use the guard break move and then hit the direction and then hit the guard break move again, and your guy will kind of like push him off that direction. And so you can throw guys into spikes that way, or throw them off the tops of buildings or off of bridges. And that was always super satisfying, because I think there's probably a boss or mini boss in the game that you can kill that way and like instantly do away with them by using that. There are like different kinds of executions that you can do. I think there are 2 different executions with each class, and some of them are really, really like meaty and satisfying. There's also counters that you can do that seem almost impossible to do in the campaign, but I would imagine that would be sort of something that you would get involved with in the multiplayer. And there are feints, so you can like hold down your heavy attack, and I think if you, at least on the keyboard, if you hit E at the same time, there'll be this sort of like motion blur type thing, and then you'll be kind of back to where you are. So like basically, if you're in your overhead stance and you swing at an enemy and that enemy's in their overhead stance, they'll automatically block your attack. If the enemy's in the overhead and you swing with your right stance, your attack will get through. So there's this sort of matching that kind of goes on to try to make sure you've got it. In the maps and stuff, there are these level specific abilities that you can get. So you might go up into a tower and you'll unlock this sort of like fire arrows, which doesn't really make a lot of sense, but then you can just sort of every once in a while pop out with some fire arrows. And depending on which level you're playing, there are different kind of contextual skills that you can find in the environment. There's also an active and passive sort of skills that you can take into combat too, and those kind of level up as you go through the campaign. And I think I spent most of my time with a passive that like reduced the amount of damage I took statically, and then like an active that healed me, which wasn't very exciting, but I didn't go down a lot, so well, for what that's worth. There's some fun little fun little pieces in some of the maps. There's one where you find this elephant and you need to kind of provoke him to charge in these different directions. There's another one where you're chasing this guy on horseback. So, I mean, I was just surprised that I had as much of a good time with it as I did. First of all, I guess I didn't know that it really even, I think I had heard that it had a co-op campaign, but like I had sort of forgotten about it. And, some of the games that are on like platform specific stuff, like if your game's only available on like Uplay or Origin, sometimes, if it's not out right at that moment, I'll just kind of like forget it exists. So I hadn't thought about For Honor and, since it was released.
Yeah.
And then I just went on there and just played it. So I think if anybody's looking for like a really high quality, 5-hour co-op experience, it's kind of worth doing. I won't say it's like, my favorite thing, but it's pretty good. So that's a thing that I got into.
It's kind of neat that you came out sort of positive on this game, because I don't know, like the concept, maybe, I don't know. To me, like the concept, in some ways, feels like a. I don't know how to say this without sounding like super derogatory, but like Vikings, knights, and samurai. Like, I don't know. That's like something I would have been super into when I was like 13. And yeah, and then there was a lot of controversy about like the online multiplayer, so I just my perception of this game has not been very high.
Well, I didn't really dip into the multiplayer. It did seem like, I guess to me, the issues with the multiplayer, I don't think they would be because the system wasn't well thought out enough. I think they really did put a lot of thought into this melee combat system. I guess I felt like if there were issues with the multiplayer, it would just be because I don't know that I've ever played like a third-person multiplayer melee combat game that really felt where the internet, I guess, connection felt responsive enough to really handle it. I mean, people are, when you talk about like people playing like Smash Brothers and people playing like, your different, Street Fighter games. I mean, a lot of times people get into how many frames it takes to do a certain move and what range you need to be away to actually do it. And, you can create a system that allows for that depth, but if the multiplayer connection just isn't really quick enough, then none of that stuff really matters. You can't really get into that level with it, So, I can't say, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of goofy, that you're playing with like knights and Vikings, but, it's certainly, it kind of got us a little bit interested in it. I think the main sort of story that's kind of happening is there's this woman, named like Alonia or something, and she's basically just going around raiding, and this isn't the entirety of the story, but she's going around raiding these different, camps. And as she raids them, basically the last fighters to go down, she'll basically offer them like a chance to join her. And so it's almost like she's got this sort of like natural selection creation of her squad going around. And so her squad is like the nastiest, because she'll go slaughter these whole villages. And then whoever's left, she's like, I think you're a wolf. You should join me on my all-star team. And so then, but so it's kind of I don't know. So it's almost like she's like trying to figure out who the best warriors are from all the different cultures and all the different styles, the different Vikings and samurais and whatever else. But, it's not, like I said, it's goofy, but, it was kind of fun. So
yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear it wasn't like bad.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm always glad to hear that games aren't bad. Unless those games are bad, in which case,
you want to hear about
happy.
Yeah. So, I guess we've talked a long time, and we probably, I don't know that we really need to do any kind of news or anything, but I do want to ask one question to all of the panel members before we wrap it up. And, first question would be, what are you planning to play over the next couple of weeks? And the second question would be, what was the most exciting takeaway that you had from the E3 Electronic something Expo, maybe?
Yep.
I don't know.
That's it.
Electronic Entertainment Expo.
There we go. Electronic
2018.
Entertainment Expo 2018.
Triple E.
So let's start, I guess, in the same order that we did this whole jam. So how about you first, Nate Dogg?
Uh-huh. upcoming games for me, I just started Subnautica, so I'm going to be going into that. And then I also got a couple things in the Steam sale that's going on. So I got Slay the Spire, which is an early access deck building roguelike game. And then I got the second season of Orwell, Ignorance is Strength. So I'll be doing those.
Sounds good. And what about E3?
Well, there were definitely things that I liked from E3. I'm very excited about Smash Bros. Ultimate, and
I heard they changed. I heard they redid Wii Fit Trainer's face.
Yeah, it looks way different. I don't know. They said something about it. that direct presentation was hilarious and ridiculous because they just got so deep in the weeds with like, here's a little tiny thing we changed. Let's talk about it.
It almost sounded like they were trying to convince people that it was different.
Yeah,
it's like there's tens of thousands of changes. Doesn't Ike's voice sound different to you?
It sure does sound different. All right. But yeah, I'm super excited for that. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that sounded interesting. It sounds like that Cyberpunk 2077 demo made a huge splash, so I'm curious to actually see what that looks like whenever they show gameplay to the public.
Yeah, like everyone just came out of that just raving about that game.
But yeah, those are my highlights.
And, what about you, Flex?
Coming up, gonna hopefully polish off Subnautica in the next week or two. That's still the main goal. Also picked up a number of Steam sale games. I'm not sure exactly what the next thing I'll get into will be. It'll probably be it'll probably either be Life is Strange Before the Storm, Orwell, They Are Billions, or Opus Magnum. That's kind of the short list I'm pulling from, but I don't know which of those I'll hit next, but Subnautica's the main thing.
And the Electronic Entertainment Expo.
Also really want to see Cyberpunk 2077. That's kind of the big one, I think. I'm really excited. Well, I really want to play Tetris Effect.
All right.
That seems potentially really cool. And that's coming out this year. So most of the stuff at E3 was next year.
Yeah.
Or beyond.
Gotcha.
And then there's a whole bunch of things that look potentially cool. But I'd say those are probably the main things, along with like Ghost of Tsushima and Sekiro?
Shadows Die Twice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm really curious about both of those as well.
All right.
And they showed a new Doom trailer. That looks cool.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimate or Forever or
Eternal.
Okay. I knew it was something monumental.
Halo Infinite.
They said the phrase Hell on Earth somewhere in there, so
gotcha.
Why they didn't just call it Doom 2 Hell on Earth, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we'll never know.
Never know.
Unless
Ori and Will of the Wisp look cool too.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, Ryan.
Hey. For me, up next, continue playing God of War. If I get through that, not so sure. Maybe like Subnautica, which I also picked up on the Steam sale. Not 100% sure past that. For E3 was interesting for me. I think, so I guess just at a high level, not to get too deep into the weeds, but I found that I enjoyed Microsoft's conference, but didn't really enjoy the overall conferences for any of the other major, I guess, publishers. But
that's fair.
I found
a lot of them were pretty rough.
Yeah.
I found things that were interesting, like individual games that were interesting from almost all of them. So I guess it's still kind of successful in a way. For me, some of the most interesting things are short-term. It kind of put Ghost of Tsushima and the new Spider-Man game more on my radar. Ghost in particular, I hadn't seen much of, and that game looks really cool. Other than that, that's the stuff that I feel like is coming out this year. Like longer term, I
don't think Ghost is this year.
Oh, is it not this year?
No, I'm pretty sure that might not even be next year. That's a ways off.
Oh, that makes me sad.
Yeah, almost nothing I feel like was for this year. I think that's part of why I'm excited about Tetris Effect, because it's actually something that's coming out this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, like, because Spider-Man, I think, is coming out this year, and I want to
Yeah,
see
Spider-Man's also this year.
I'm kind of interested in like games like Anthem and The Division. Those look like if they have good gameplay, they could be really fun multiplayer. But again, those are like 2019, and then with stuff like Cyberpunk, I think it's super cool that we actually got to see a trailer, and it's that's yet another thing that Microsoft kind of gets a win for, is pulling that off. The way that the hype was kind of, they like what they CD Projekt Red like tweeted out like something, and that was all that had been heard from that game since the original teaser.
And then apparently they had like a 50-minute gameplay demo that they showed behind closed doors that was amazing.
Yeah, because everyone came out and saying it was amazing, but no one outside of the press has actually seen that demo.
Yeah.
So how about that Kojima game?
Sure.
All right, that's a good note to end the podcast on.
Well, I wanted to say things too. So first of all, I guess in terms of what to play next, probably, I don't know. I'm actually thinking about diving into Dreamfall chapters, which is something that I know Ryan, I think, has played.
Do you own it yet? Because I don't know that I would strongly recommend it.
Well, we'll talk about it some more.
Is that
I
the one
I got it in a humble bundle, I think.
It is.
Otherwise, I'll probably keep playing a game called Tower 57. I've been working on a little bit in the co-op front, and another game called Ben and Ed Blood Party, which is absurd. But it's kind of you guys should look that up if you haven't already seen anything about it, because it's a hoot and a half. Anyway, in terms of E3, probably surprising no one, I'm most excited about Control, the Remedy game, but also am interested in Wolfenstein Youngbloods, which is a co-op standalone game that may come out soon-ish. Don't know exactly when.
How much did they show of Control? Because I feel like
just a cinematic trailer with a little bit of gameplay.
Yeah, I think I follow Remedy on like Facebook. I think they posted another video of some gameplay or something like that. But it looks fun to me. And Remedy has a pretty strong track record with me, so I think I'll probably dig it. But anyway, I want to thank everybody for joining us. And I guess we'll be back in your feeds, as they say, in another week or two.
Thank you, Will.
I do what I can, sir. All right. And we'll see you later.